Now that you know how he came to power, the real question is, how did he hold on to it?
Moi relied heavily on the intelligence system. At that time, it was called the special branch. Moi relied very heavily on this system.
He goes through an experience between 1982 and 1984 where some people even thought they should kick him out and others thought they should overthrow him. And Moi was able to sustain himself during those 4 or so years. He was a very tough leader, a tough African statesman, and very kind. You know, he believed on the principle of carrot and stick. You either toe the line. If you toe the line, you receive good rewards. You reap rewards. You reap benefits. If you play with him, he told me that anybody plays with me, or anybody who plays with him would be hit faster than lightning.
Ni wajibu wetu kama yuko shida kwa shule fulani, tufanye harambee. Mimi Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi naapa kwamba nitakuwa mwaminifu kwa Jamhuri ya Kenya.
Moi's way of running government was eventually he made the final decision himself.
He began by making one thing clear. There was a new sheriff in town.
But 1978 became a very mammoth year for this nation, because you have brought into the fray of leadership a man and a character who holds both providential lack and marginalization by the leaders. He combines the two to take a nation, and unfortunately, he goes through an experience between 1982 and 1984 where some people even thought they should kick him out and others thought they should overthrow him. And Moi was able to sustain himself during those 4 or so years.
Now, with all eyes turned to Kenya's new leader, he strides confidently into the presidency. Wasting no time, Moi seeks to capture the world's attention. Determined to show that a new and energetic hand now steered the nation. He hosts world leaders in Nairobi's Grand Summit and flies to global power centers like the United Kingdom and France, projecting Kenya's rising stature on the international stage.
Perhaps Moi was the weakest of the presidents in the world at the time, power-wise.
Mnasikia mimi mara kwa mara nasema mambo ya ukabila tubilieni mbali. Wananchi wa Kenya kokote wanakoendelea, hiyo ni nchi yao.
At home, Moi rallies his people with the electrifying slogan, Nyayo, Swahili for footsteps, a pledge to follow firmly in the path of his predecessor, Jomo Kenyatta.
Never leave the ivory tower. We must serve those who are less fortunate. Serve them faithfully.
When Moi became president, he had a lot of support. The whole country wanted him to succeed. No doubt about that.
Moi was a very well-informed president. Moi consulted. Moi could even call in on matters of provincial administration. He could call even an assistant chief.
Eager to win the public's trust, Moi cultivates the image of a hands-on president, immersing himself in the everyday lives of ordinary citizens.
Now you're finding some people together as one, pulling together now, yeah, building the nation now.
Hawafikiri environment ambayo wanyama hawa hukaa.
Moi's leadership style soon became apparent. To maintain power, he needed to stay alert and ensure that any potential rivals were kept in check or sidelined. He began by targeting Kenyatta's inner circle, those who opposed him, systematically removing their influence. Moi faced an easy truth. Some of his earliest and most trusted allies harbored ambitions he deemed dangerous. To them, he appeared fragile, an interim caretaker, unlikely to endure.
And then there was a special meeting of heavyweights from the Cukes. There was Jomo Kenyatta representing Kiambu. There was Kiano representing Muranga. And there was Kibaki,
properly supported in accordance with the Constitution,
representing Nyeri, the greater these things. And they went to pledge loyalty to the president. But what stood out was the language they used in pledging what? Loyalty. Kibaki said, "We accept you as the president because it is the right thing to do." But also he had a rider, and don't mess up the economy. Kiano said that we accept you because you are the one that Jomo left to us. Koinange spoke in a language that was not English and raised the question of what had been planted. Is it beans or coffee? Now, you know how long beans take to mature? It's 3 months, eh? You can
3 months.
Plant and eat in 3 months, eh? Or is it coffee which takes about 5 years before you can harvest anything? So Moi turned to Kiano, his friend, and what did the guy say? Because it was not in English, eh? And Kiano told Moi, you know, the Kikuyu he spoke is so deep that I also have a problem with it. What he said, eh? Of course, Moi understood Kikuyu very well. He didn't need someone to tell him. He knew.
Determined to tame rivals and cement Central Kenya's loyalty, Moi leaned on a select group of allies. Chief among them was Charles Mugabe Njonjo, the Aben Attorney General who had been instrumental in his ascent to State House. Alongside Njonjo stood Laikipia's Gigi Karuki and Moi's carefully chosen deputy, Nyeri's own Mwai Kibaki, polished, cautious, and widely respected.
He had to make Kibaki his vice. He had no choice. It was either Njonjo or Kibaki. But Moi knew Njonjo. Moi knew Njonjo. Because the same group that made him, the British, is the same group that made Njonjo.
Na kwa vyovyote vile sitatoa siri za baraza la mawaziri.
He picked Kibaki, in my view, for two reasons. One, Kibaki was fairly elitist, not excited by a lot of power, as long as he had enough of it that can enable him to drink his Tusker, and that's it. He didn't have this entrenchment abroad like Njonjo did. So between the two, Kibaki was a lesser evil, the man from the Republic of Othaya. The Prince of Kabetasha, as Njonjo could famously be referred to, was much more dangerous with political power. So from the word start, The moment they said, on your mark, set, go, on the presidency, Moi knew that the man to watch was who? Charles.
And Kenyatta believed that it was Njonjo who made Kibaki vice president. See, Njonjo looking as if he's the power, eh? So he's the one who told Moi to appoint Kibaki. Because Kibaki looked as if he's easier to remove when the time comes, eh? So you first get rid of the vice president, and then you can
you can come and
you can do something else, eh? And so Kenyatta used to comment, Njonjo just did not understand what he was doing, who he was dealing with, how sharp Kibaki is, eh? So he made a mistake.
Mimi Mwai Kibaki naapa kwamba nitakuwa mwaminifu kwa Rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya Mheshimiwa Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, na nitaitumikia Kenya kwa moyo wangu wote, na kwamba nitaihifadhi, nitailinda na kuitetea katiba ya Kenya kwa mujibu wa sheria iliyowekwa. Ewe Mwenyezi Mungu msaidie.
This trio formed a visible axis of power, often photographed squeezed into a presidential limousine, a portrait of power masking the deep calculations at play behind the tinted glass.
Moi tried to learn as much as he could on what was happening in the country.
Moi was a weak president, very weak. If there is a term stronger than weak in English, just tell me. I will use it. Now, to survive that, he used two strategies. One is a strategy of appeasement and populism. AP. Moi went outright to appease the public by certain policies that depicted the previous regime as less populist. Full throat, maziwa ya Nyayo, school milk, which came up to my village. I drank it. You didn't, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I drank. You drank it? Yeah.
in my early primary.
I mean, we were shocked. Maziwa milk, maziwa ya Nyayo. Very populist programs, which touched the heart of the common mwananchi. Politics of appeasement. He turned state resources into arms that he could give very easily. Organized women groups, give them money to do this, do that. Started a very ambitious land conservation programs to give him a chance to link with the people and liberate himself from Njonjo and Kibaki. You have seen him lifting heavy stones, gabions, building gabions. And what came out of it as a policy is a very populist approach to development. And the goal was actually to touch the hearts of people. You know, sometimes politics is not touching the mind, it's touching the heart.
He was a very tough leader, a tough African statesman, and very kind. You know, he believed on the principle of carrot and stick. You either toe the line. If you toe the line, you receive good rewards. You reap rewards. You reap benefits. He told me that anybody who plays with me, or anybody who plays with him, would be hit faster than lightning. Yes. Now he changed.
There can never be understanding without love for humanity.
But Moi's true intentions would only be revealed 4 years into his presidency, ignited by a moment that shook his world to its core.
His true character came out after 1982.
On the morning of August 1st, 1982, the nation awoke to chaos. a faction of disgruntled Air Force officers staged a bold coup, seizing control of the capital in a lightning strike on power. For a few tense hours, the fate of Kenya hung in the balance until loyal troops led by Brigadier Mohamud Mohammed crushed the uprising with brutal efficiency.
That era of 1980s was a tough one because it showed him who his real friends were and who his enemies were.
Yale yaliyotokea leo asubuhi kwa muda mfupi iliyoletea wananchi wasiwasi mwingi.
That day redrew the map of Kenyan politics. Suspected mutineers were hunted down, tortured, and some executed without mercy.
A member of parliament from Kakamega and another one from Kisii, a member of parliament, they wrote letters to General Moringe, who was the head of the armed forces, telling him, please do not forget us. Although they wrote, of course, individually, do not forget us in your new government. Now, when the coup attempt was quashed by the infantry, the letters were already in the post office and they could not retrieve them. So General Moringe brought the letters to Moi. Look at your friends. The member of parliament from Kakamega later collapsed and died. He could not live with the shame. The one from Kisii retreated and kept quiet. He resurfaced after multipartism. He's still alive with that one, so I don't want to mention his name.
Kwa hivyo nataka nyinyi kuwa watu wenye fikira za kuangalia mbele. Kenya inaenda mbio kwa kila njia.
From that moment, an invisible shroud of fear descended across the land.
1982 coup changed Moi's strategy completely because it rearranged his priorities. Before then, his approach to public life, public affairs was different from after the coup. Because after the coup, he realized that he had enemies within, so he had to try and reorganize the government to his own liking.
That is the time that switched Moi on to become the dictator that in fact tortured me, jailed me, and isolated me, not only from my own compatriots, but even from my own family.
Moi had to become tough.
Moi emerged from the ashes of the coup transformed, hardened, determined. His grip on power would tighten like never before.
These people now, they want to overturn my government. They want to assassinate me. He had, of course, to adopt survival tactics. He became paranoid. Not because he's a coward. It's because he needed to preserve himself. There is no way you can be a good leader if you are dead.
There is a possibility that 1982 was an artificial coup. Artificial in the sense that it could have been deliberately either allowed to happen or made to happen to give a very clear excuse for Moi to stamp his authority, particularly over Kikuyus and Luo.
Kenya was sealed into a one-party state where dissent was no longer just risky, it was deadly.
Well, there were punches here. There were punches, realignment in the political setup, in the military, in the police here.
He built a fortress of security and intelligence around his role, weaving surveillance into the very fabric of governance. Knowledge became his deadliest weapon.
Moi relied heavily on the intelligence system. At that time, it was called the Special Branch. Moi relied very heavily on this system to help him make his decisions. First of all, he was a very early riser. Moi would be up at about 5 in the morning, and he would have his very early meetings with his security chiefs from about 5:30, 6 a.m. in the morning. When the rest of the country is now coming in, when other people are coming in, maybe for either cabinet meetings or other sessions which start at 8 or 7:30, by that time, Moi has had his brief with all his security teams.
And he wielded it to ensure not just his survival, but the permanency of his reign.
It is what made Kenya what it could be until the end of the Moi regime.
Moi's suspicions had crystallized into certainty. Shadows within his own circle were plotting betrayal, and he vowed they would not have a second chance.
That is when Moi is reborn. That is now the real Moi. Moi the president.
His resolve was ruthless: eliminate them all and tighten his hold on power.
Of course, he starts by disbanding the military and reforming it. You know, the Air Force was very elitist at the time, and it could only allow those who got up to Form 6 and qualified very well. That's why majority of the Luos ended up in the Air Force up to that point, and the majority of the Kikuyus were in the army.
Na asanti salimia jamii yako na wote.
So he did a patch of both, and then he now brought in the people who had almost nearly 100% loyalty, his own people, a few military officers from Mukambani. That's why he let Mulinge continue. I mean, how do you imagine? Your officers have caused a coup, and your commander-in-chief, you are the technical person of the military, and you are untouched. Does that tell you something? Mulinge knew what happened.
Then that's when Charles Njonjo and Mwai Kibaki pushed through a constitutional amendment to create Section 2A, declaring Kenya to be a one-party what? State. And that party is KANU. End of the story. Nobody objected.
The golden era of now. Kenya, one nation, Kenya, one people.
Enter the new power players, figures carefully drawn from President Moi's own Kalenjin heartland.
So people saying strange things, he's just watching them from far. And then marking time, each kila mtu na wakati yake.
So he dealt with these people
systematically. So you see the way he dumped Koinange. First of all, he made him minister of some unknown things. From being a minister of state that was very powerful, very close to Kenyatta, they were always together. So now it's an environment, look after some animals out there. And so once the Koinange was out of the way, who then should comes in the picture? Njonjo, the one who was showing off as if he's the one in charge. And Njonjo never learned from Moi. Humble yourself.
Nicholas Biwott, the shrewd tactician. Simon Nyachai, an ambitious operator, steadily climbing Moi's inner circle, and Hezekiah Oyugi, the formidable provincial commissioner. Together, they became Moi's hidden arsenal, his instruments in reshaping Kenya's political order. Like Kenyatta before him, Moi wielded the provincial administration not just as a bureaucracy, but as the iron muscle of his regime.
He tightened the control both on the government and the political party. He reorganized KANU political party to give it more power. And you know, it is after 82 that we had the famous committee of obtained, the disciplinary committee was brought into Kano.
We say in my language that the best way of hunting is when you hunt like a leopard, not when you hunt like a lion. Tuarabunengo to tuarabunendu. Hunt like a leopard, don't hunt like a lion. You know, a lion roars 10 kilometers away. The victims have heard that this guy is around. A leopard is very still.
By the time you
waits, and when it springs, hardly misses. That was Moi.
Pengine mtoto ambaye angeenda mbele anapata vikwazo kwa sababu hakuna pesa, wazazi hawana. Na ndio juzi nikasema certificates ya wale ambao zilikuwa zinasoma katika shule wenyewe wachukue certificates zao.
The stage reached its climax on May 8, 1983, the venue, a fundraising rally in Kisii organized by Simeon Nyachai.
Lazima nyinyi wazazi mjue kwamba kazi yetu ni kujenga.
Imagine the scene. Thousands gathered under the sun, schools crying out for aid.
Kazi yetu ni kuangalia kwamba kila shule ina
anticipation in the air
za kutosha mahitaji ya wanafunzi.
President Moi steps forward, rungu in the hand.
Shule fulani tufanye harambee.
Then in a thunderous declaration he warns, there is someone backed by foreign powers being groomed to sabotage my leadership.
He was not strong on that statement. He said as if it was casual. It was not emphatic.
The message was sharp, but Moi had just made his move in full view of the nation.
As a journalist, I said, this is the news. So I drove to Nakuru with my small typewriter, and then it was the intro. And then the newspapers now, they splashed it.
They splashed it. It became viral.
Yeah, it became viral.
But it laid the foundation for the Msaliti story.
Parliament took over. Then Mwangari said, because Moi did not say who it was. So Mwangari said it is Njonjo.
On the floor of the house?
Yes. Yeah. Now that is how things now began to explode. Yes, I'm the one who wrote the story, 83. That's more typewriter. Because when he spoke in Kisii, some said, iko wengine wanasaidiwa na watu wa nje kuchukua serikali. But you know, it was not emphatic, it was not a warning, it was not a caution. He said it in a very casual manner. It didn't matter. He said it.
So Njonjo, who had looked as if he was the co-president, when Moi became president, they were riding together. And looking like as if he's the one. He was shown the door,
By 1983, Njonjo had stepped down from the cabinet role and relinquished his Kikuyu MP seat. Moi's memo was straightforward. Observe the consequences of betraying the regime and its leader. That is the way they will end.
Now, with Njonjo out of the way, and with the 1980 becoming increasingly draconian, who was the next target?
Kibaki.
Yes. And at least Kibaki was warned in public.
Don't think.
Don't think. It's not your job. It's a presidential assignment, thinking. You just do what you are told. He said that when I was vice president, I had no mind of my own. So who are you?
Who are you?
Yeah.
Where are you coming from?
And 4 years later, Kibaki was dumped as the vice president and shifted it to Minister of Health, which he did with gusto. Because Kibaki understood Moi, and he tried as much as possible, don't get on the wrong side of this guy.
Meanwhile, Nicholas Biwott emerged from the fallout, his influence stronger than ever. Now, this is how Moi clung to power in the aftermath of the 1982 coup attempt. He tightened his grip through an invisible web of watchers and enforcers, Moving in silence, yet with ruthless precision, Moi unleashed a loyal secret police, many drawn from his inner circle, to seize opponents, lock them away without trial, and bend society to his will through fear.
He moves away from populism to suppression, because the coup had given him a free ticket. Suppress those who have dissent against your regime.
Yeah, no, as the law.
Jail them. Put in the laws that speak to that.
That was the law then. I don't think President Moi did anything outside the law in terms of arrests and detentions, because there was a provision in the law that a person shall be detained by the president. It was in the law.
But Moi understood that brute force was never enough. To remind every rival that nowhere was truly safe, he wove an intricate network of informants. In his Kenya, suspicion lived in every shadow. Neighbors, friends, even family could be spies. Trust itself became a rare and dangerous luxury, and yet fear was only half the foundation of his power.
But then Moi was a clever politician. He moderated suppression with corruption. As you see,
Moi mastered the art of temptation. He knew how to exploit human frailty, wielding patronage like a weapon. When intimidation faltered, he offered wealth, titles, and privilege. With calculated generosity, he turned foes into allies, critics into loyal beneficiaries, each coin, each appointment binding them tighter to his rule.
Those who were ready to work with him, he co-opted them. And for the first time, we started now seeing professors experiencing some kind of exodus or exile from university to abroad and from university to public service.
So those who go abroad?
Yeah. Those who are the ones he wanted to suppress. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Maina wa Kenyati, Mukarunganga. Those ones, Mukarunganga was in our department of history and archaeology. I'm sure you know that. Then there were those he co-opted. For the first time, a historian became an executive chairman of a bank. We can manage money historians, Dr. Benjamin Kipkorir, from that department. Historians became ambassadors. Professor Ida Salim became Kenya's ambassador to Netherlands. Dr. Sally Kosgei, although that was not the first, even earliest, the first Kenya's ambassador to London when we gained independence was a historian, Dr. Josephat Karanja. Historians, we have a way to warn evil. Then he co-opted Professor Henry Mwanzi. He's around, still around, moved to KU. Dr. Seka, Eric, you know that? The people who talked very eloquently about Nyayo philosophy. Hello? Dr. Yusuf Nzubo was sent as an ambassador of Kenya. Yeah, he's still around. Sally Kosgei. Sally Kosgei was taken, sent as an ambassador to London. Later on, became the topmost civil servant.
Moi understood that the key to binding his inner circle was simple. He had to make their fortune so deeply tied to him that no other hand could ever offer them more. He greased the palms of his men, handing them bribes and free rein to be corrupt. Costly, right? But here is the bigger question. Where was the money coming from? The answer lay in Kenya's own wealth. Moi moved to nationalize the country's natural resources, placed his loyalists in charge, and monopolized trade.
But we need to be more cooperative.
He manipulated markets, artificially raising prices, withholding goods to spike demand, slapping on punishing taxes, and watched the money roll in. Through this playbook, Moi and his inner circle amassed fortunes worth billions of shillings. Yet Like any shrewd strongman, Moi understood the power of patronage.
There is only one PS who has worked from State House, and that had to be a historian, Professor William Robert Ochieng. It was Moi's PS from State House. PSs are in ministries, but Ochieng was in State House.
Yes, he plundered the state, but he didn't hoard it all. He spread the spoils, using Kenya's stolen wealth to buy loyalty and keep senior party officials firmly in his corner. He set aside a portion of the looted wealth to appease the common people through things like maziwa ya Nyayo in schools, Harambee contributions, and other gestures. The intention was simple: to make the public believe that all was well, that Moi was indeed a good man. It was a calculated mix of charm and fear. From that moment forward, patriotism in Kenya was redefined. To love the nation meant to love the president. Daniel Arap Moi's image became inescapable, etched on banknotes, gazing from classroom walls, immortalized on murals, and echoing in rhythms of songs. Politicians tripped over themselves to shower him with praises. One minister even declared that trees and maize swayed in harmony to the chant of Nyayo, Nyayo. Kenyan musicians composed ballads in his honor. The devotion reached almost surreal heights. Peter Olo Aringo, with dramatic flourish, once proclaimed, "Your Excellency, even the birds in the sky and the animals on the ground sing your name." But beneath this choreographed adoration lay a darker truth. With a calculated stroke, Moi reshaped the nation's constitution, dismantling political pluralism and forging KANU into a single, unyielding monolith. Power was carefully distributed, an intricate balance between national heavyweights and grassroots enforcers. District KANU chairmen became kingmakers, their influence determining political survival or ruin.
You remember the days of KANU Disciplinary Committee, led by one Honorable Okiki Amayo, which made men, grown men with beard and gray hair, cry like babies.
Alongside him, Mombasa's Sharif Nasir and the Institute Njenga Karume fortified KANU's grip, demanding loyalty and enforcing Moi's order with unmatched zeal.
If KANU wanted, you could not even keep chicken, leave alone a duff or a goat in your home. If KANU wanted. A youth winger was more powerful than a primary school principal. Everything became KANU. KANU maendeleo ya wanawake, youth, KANU this, KANU that. Everything became KANU.
Moi built a covert lattice of elders and informants, men he knew personally, a shadow network binding communities to his will. And for those who dared to dissent, the price was heavy. Suppression was swift, merciless, and often final.
It was a very difficult time. Of course, there were those arrests. If I give my personal experience, I was arrested so many times, I had so many cases. I don't know which part of the country where I had not been taken to court or taken into a prison or a police station.
Between 82 and 88, just before the Murolongo elections, it was SCC. People made money, people made careers out of that process. And then people lost careers, people lost lives.
Many fled into exile. Others vanished without a trace, detained indefinitely or tortured in the dreaded chambers of Nyayo House. Some never lived to tell their story. The murder of Foreign Affairs Minister Robert Ouko in 1990 remains one of the darkest chapters in Kenya's political history, an unresolved riddle that still casts its shadows across the nation. On the morning of February 12th, the country awoke to whispers of mystery. Ouko had vanished from his home in Koru, near Kisumu. 4 days later, on February 16th, the nation recoiled in horror. His charred body was found in Gotalila, barely a mile from his residence. The scene was chilling, almost theatrical. A pistol loaded with a single cartridge lay near his head. Beside it, his Somali sword and walking stick, placed with uncanny precision. A bullet wound pierced just above his right ear. A jerrycan of fuel discarded close by hinted at a desperate attempt to erase him in fire. But the details betrayed the illusion. A polythene bag filled with neatly folded cloth, socks, jeans, a kitenge shirt, a leather jacket holding 4 rounds of ammunition and 450 shillings was found a few meters away. A box of matches, allegedly used to set him alight, sat conveniently placed as though arranged for investigators to find. His leg was broken, a silent clue suggesting violence beyond the flames. A torch, borrowed from a worker, rested near his remains. Its batteries were dead, incapable of illuminating the shadows of the night when Ouko's life was taken. To calm the storm, President Daniel Arap Moi called upon Britain's Scotland Yard. Investigators pointed fingers at powerful figures: Nicholas Biwott, Moi's close ally and then energy minister, and Hezekiah Oyugi, the president's influential permanent secretary. Both were detained briefly, then quietly released. A judicial commission of inquiry led by Justice Evans Gisheru began its work, but was suddenly disbanded, leaving behind more questions than answers. Those who had dared to pursue the truth, Police Commissioner Philip Kilonzo and Philip Shikuku, the humble herdsman who first stumbled upon Ouko's body, are themselves long gone, their voices silenced. A cover-up so deliberate it could only point to the hand of the state itself. Whispers in the corridors of power placed President Daniel Arap Moi and his trusted lieutenant Nicholas Biwott at the very heart of the conspiracy.
I have also equally been touched by your decision to nominate me to be the candidate for the President of Kenya on our party ticket.
In a year that shook the very pillars of Moi's rule, tragedy struck again. Defying a chilling warning from Cabinet Minister Peter Okondo, Anglican Bishop Alexander Muge set out for Busia. Okondo had vowed he would not return alive. Days later, the prophecy came true. Muge died in a road crash at Tarbo. Yet the nation murmured in disbelief. Many called it no accident, but an assassination in disguise. Moi's once iron grip was slipping. A fearless pro-democracy wave surged forward, strengthened by defectors from his own KANU party. Figures like Kenneth Matiba and Charles Rubia became the new voices of defiance. Criticism against Moi's style of leadership were growing with each passing day, and they were coming from quarters that the then president least expected. A vibrant atmosphere at the institutions of higher learning, especially the University of Nairobi, was at its highest, with both lecturers and student leaders putting their freedoms and life on the line to push for change. clergymen teamed up with the political class to agitate for the reintroduction of multi-party democracy in Kenya. But the vibrant intellectuals, clergymen and opposing politicians shortly discovered that the ruthless Moi government was eager to answer fire with more fire. Some of them were forced to run and go into exile. Those arrested found themselves at the Nyayo torture chambers and later in court, where they were hurriedly sentenced to imprisonment.
That constitution allowed Moi to make decrees. That constitution allowed him to make pronouncements without certain levels of consultation, as currently provided for in the current constitution. Moi could pronounce your dismissal through radio, and indeed many ministers during his tenure lost their jobs by just hearing it over the radio.
But the clamor for change grew louder as the suppression became more severe. The 1988 Mlolongo elections left a sour egg in the face of KANU and only served to increase the numbers of those that wanted the return of multi-party democracy. The system of voting had literally allowed Moi to handpick members of the 6th Parliament. Something had changed irreversibly. For those agitating for change, there was no rolling back the wheel for change. Religious criticism had just set in, and Moi was facing a new kind of wave for change. On the 5th of October 1986, Reverend Timothy Njonjo, then a minister at St. Andrew's PCA Church in Nairobi, fired the first salvo. He called for the change of Kenya's constitution.
More people were saying, if you can see really a long line being declared the loser, and the small line, the short line, being declared the winner, there is really something wrong in our political spectrum. We need to change it so that it is the majority that takes the day.
When Matiba and Charles Rubia declared a bold rally on July 7th, 1990, Saba, the regime reacted with force. The rally was banned. Matiba and Rubia were arrested, dragged into detention without trial.
He made it very difficult for anybody to say anything unless you are, of course, parroting what he had said before, or you are a court poet singing praise to him.
Undeterred, pro-democracy activists poured into the streets of Nairobi, clashing head-on with police. Riots erupted. A brutal crackdown followed. Scores arrested, others beaten, but the resistance only burned brighter. Kenya was caught in the rising tide of multi-party democracy. The world itself was shifting. Eastern Europe broke free from communist chains. Across the globe, democracy was on the march, and Africa was no exception. Kenya felt the tremors. Moi, once described by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga as a giraffe who sees far, could sense what was coming. But even in the storm of change, his survival instincts never failed him. In December 1991, Moi, against the advice of many KANU diehards, rallied the party to repeal Section 2A of the Constitution and allow for the reintroduction of multi-party politics.
Fungue section hiyo, na nauliza nyinyi nyote kukaa na mimi, tuende barabara yetu tukiwa KANU pamoja.
Moi was a very dominant president, and he literally controlled KANU. People were scared of speaking out fully. So even that conference at Kasarani, people had been choreographed to say that we should remain a one-party state. We knew that people would be saying that, but at some stage Moi was going to turn around. So that the presentation would have been that he, as Moi, has seen the future, has seen that multipartyism, whatever, and he came out and said, I must save you as a country. I know you love me, I know you love Kanu, I know you love that, but the world has changed.
But what followed the change of the constitution portrayed Moi as a master of political tactics and a grand schemer.
Now forward!
As the opposition went on frenzy, celebrating the repealing of Section 2A, Moi started to scheme on how Kanu will stay in power beyond the 1992 elections. Riding on the wave of change, the then opposition outfit Ford had turned out to be a huge force that swept the whole country. But Moi's bag of tricks had one more surprise for the opposition.
The special branch was now well aware of the discussions and the divisions that were emerging from Ford. So quite a number of them traveled to the United Kingdom and told Matiba that, this is your chance. And secondly, they told him that, if he did not take his chance, then Mwai Kibaki was going to eclipse him. Matiba was taken in, but not absolutely, until the day when he came back and was received in a way that I don't think a leader has been received in Kenya until the time when Raila also was received.
Every status quo situation, it uses a method that will scatter the opposition. Jaramogi Odinga is slightly older than Kenneth Matiba. So you put into the head of Kenneth Matiba that it is time for Jaramogi Odinga to go where? Go home. So when he's coming, I'm younger and he's old and he has had his time. He needs to go away. So that's what was done. Kenneth Matiba was given that impression just by some statements. And then when he came, he had a very good reception at the airport, our president. Now, when he saw that reception, everybody said, by the way, is moved by the ground.
The one who came waving.
And then they come waving. They were blackguards, waving him to be the president. The first thing he did when he now landed in Ford was a big quarrel with Jaramogi Odinga. And that trap caused a split in Ford. Then you ended up having Ford Kenya, and then you now ended up having Ford Asili.
And so Moi and Kanu romped home in 1992 and managed to stay in power until the last gamble at naming a successor in 2002. The man once hailed as Kenya's professor of politics left quietly, his legacy a paradox. Brilliance and blunders, endurance and excesses, forever etched into history. My name is Enoch Sikolia, and I am the Kenyan Historian.